Hello and thank you so much for tuning in. Today I thought I would do my 2017 Best in Beauty / current staples, and I know that everybody has already done their version of this video. It's March, 2017 is ancient history, but I still thought that this would be a good way to showcase what products in my collection that I'm consistently reaching for, especially because I am planning on doing a month in review series here on my channel, and I want a way to differentiate from those products that I reach for consistently on a month-to-month basis, as opposed to those that I'm just trying for the first time or rediscovering in my collection for that month. So that is why we are here, and I will say that most of the products I'm going to be mentioning are products that were either launched in 2017 or I personally purchased for the first time in 2017. So there's going to be like a lot of stuff that was basically new to me in 2017. First, I thought I would start with primers, and it's funny because if I had done the same video for 2016, then I wouldn't have any primers to talk about at all. For the longest time, I thought primers were a scam because none of them did anything beneficial for the wear of my makeup. In fact, a lot of them actually made the wear of my makeup much worse. So the fact that I found 3 this year that worked really well for me is kind of impressive. So the first one I'll talk about here is by NARS, and NARS did launch a line of primers at the beginning of last year, and I actually have another one of them, but this is the one that really stood out to me, and this is the Pore and Shine Control Primer. And I am somebody who does sort of get oily in the center of my face, so I'm always looking for things to help kind of keep that under control. And until I had tried this one, I had never found anything that quite did that for me. So I do feel like this does a good job of controlling oil. I tried this underneath you know, various foundations, and I've worn those same foundations by themselves, and I know that they, you know, are not going to look good at the end of the day if I don't, you know, set them with powder. But this, even by itself with no powder, definitely made a difference in how my foundation wore and the amount of oil I had breaking through my foundation by the end of the day. So I would definitely recommend this if you have oily skin. As far as the pore control claims go, I can't really speak too much to that because I don't actually have very visible pores, but this primer does have dimethicone in it, which I know is a silicone that does help to sort of smooth out the pores. What I will say I like about this though, as opposed to a lot of other silicone based primers I've tried, is I feel like this actually does set into place, and so my makeup does not slide around on top of it. Next up, this is the Becca Backlight Priming Filter, and this product actually didn't come out in 2017, but I did purchase it last year during Ulta's 21 Days of Beauty sale in the spring. I got this for half off, which was nice because I think normally this retails for close to $40. And the reason why I like this is because I feel like it did for me what I just generally expected all primers would do, and I feel like that is create a physical barrier between your skin and the makeup that's going on top of it. So I know that might sound kind of bad because physical barrier makes this sound like a very like heavy product, in that you can kind of feel the barrier between, you know, your skin and your makeup, or you can feel the barrier that this creates when you put it on your skin. But I don't mean that in a sense that it feels that way, or feels heavy on the skin, if that makes any sense. But basically this just creates a really nice even canvas for your makeup to go on top of. As far as the backlight claims go though, I can't really speak too much to that. I definitely feel like when you first put this on, there is sort of a glow it gives to your face because this does have sort of like, you know, shimmer particles in it. But once I put my foundation on top, I don't really know that I notice any sort of remnants of the primer shining through, but that's okay because that's not really the main reason why I like this primer anyways. So the next primer I want to talk about is the Shiseido Ibuki Smart Filtering Smoother, and this is definitely my favorite primer of the entire bunch. And I actually picked this up on the recommendation of Tiffany, who is TiffJeff069 here on YouTube, who actually heard about it from her friend Mimi, who's also here on YouTube as Beauty by Benji. I love both of their channels, and they both have the same sort of skin concerns that I have when it comes to makeup, with being sort of like oily in the center of the face. So when I both heard them say that this was great for oil control, I knew I had to try it out, and I have to say I absolutely love this product. What's interesting about this is I think it's not even necessarily solely marketed as a sort of like primer or makeup item. It's actually marketed as a skincare item as well. It is a serum, but I find that this really helps to control oil without being too drying on the skin. I do only apply this primer on areas of my face where I get really oily, so you know, T-zone area, on my chin, sometimes a little bit onto my cheeks as well, and it does such a great job. It leaves this sort of almost powdery, velvety like finish on the skin, and I don't have any problems with my makeup going over it as well, which I like, because I know that a lot of primers like this, sort of like ones that you might only use in more concentrated areas, tend to almost like pill up and ball up, and they don't look very good on the skin, or they make it really hard to apply makeup on top of it, even if they are really good at controlling oil. And because of the lightweight serum consistency of this primer, I feel like I don't have that problem ever. Also, I will say that I know this looks like a really, you know, itty bitty bottle. You're getting 0.67 ounces here, which is, you know, 2/3 the amount you would get with a regular like 1 ounce primer. And I think this retails only for like $23, so I feel like it's very reasonably priced. And mind you, I bought this back in the summertime. I've been using it pretty consistently, and it's still going strong. So the next product that I wanted to talk about is color corrector, and that is a fundamental part of my makeup routine. I don't always do it because I get lazy, but I always notice a huge difference when I do. And the one that I've been using for years is the MAC Prep and Prime highlighter in the shade Peach Luster. And this is just like a burnt orange color corrector. I actually did try quite a few color correctors last year, but I couldn't find any that I liked better than this one. In fact, most of the ones I tried were just awful. Actually, some were just kind of like meh, but most of them were just bad. A lot of color correctors I've noticed tend to be these like really heavy cream consistencies, which again don't work very well if you have oily skin, and also if you have, you know, sort of like lines, fine lines under your eyes, or smile lines like I do, which these are the two areas where I would be color correcting. Those like heavy cream products can really settle into the lines very not nicely. And also some coloring of color correctors can be a little bit off. Some of them are maybe a little bit too red. Some have too strong of a white base. So this one was just perfect in every way because the color of this is perfect and the consistency of it is great too. It's a very lightweight consistency, very liquidy, but it blends very nicely onto the skin. I've noticed that whether I use this with a very light coverage foundation or a full coverage foundation, it still works pretty much the same. I've even found that I can get away with using this on its own without any makeup if I just wanted to color correct for the day, almost as like my way of concealing, because that's how well this blends into the skin. Next up, I thought I'd talk about foundation. I actually don't try a ton of foundations per year just because foundation is one of those things where I find that it takes me a really long time to go through foundation. Less so nowadays. I've noticed that I've been going through foundation more, but generally speaking, I tend to go through foundation slowly, so I just don't like to stockpile it. In fact, I only tried 2 last year. One was the Wet n Wild Photo Focus, which I personally didn't care for, even though I think that did come out last year as well. But the one that I did try that I really liked was NARS Sheer Glow. And I know this isn't new foundation, it's been around for years, but I did actually try this last year. I picked up quite a few things from NARS last year when they came to Ulta because I was excited to be able to like buy NARS products and get Ulta points because Ulta's reward system is so good. So this is one of the products that I tried and I absolutely love it. I do feel like the name is a bit of a misnomer though. Well, a huge misnomer, because I don't think that this foundation is sheer or glowy, which again is better for me probably because I tend to like fuller coverage foundations, and obviously for me personally, glow a lot of times can equal greasy. So this foundation I find is more of a medium buildable coverage foundation, and it has more of a satin finish, so it just looks really nice and perfected on the skin. The shade that I have here is Dark to New Orleans, which this shade actually is too dark for me. Even in the summertime, which is when I bought it, it was a little bit too dark, but I don't care. I rolled with the punches, and in fact this bottle I think is pretty much completely empty. My major con with this product is it's like you can't tell how much you have left in it at all, because I think the inside of the glass is like colored, so it's like opaque, so you can't actually see, you know, how much you have left. But other than that, I do love this foundation and I will repurchase it. Alright, so next up, let's talk powders. I have 2 that I just absolutely loved last year. One being the Laura Mercier translucent powder in medium deep, and the second being the Dermablend powder in warm saffron. I absolutely love both of these powders. If you told me to choose, I couldn't, but I do find that I use them for different purposes. First up, I have the Laura Mercier translucent setting powder in medium deep. I was so glad to see that they came out with a colored version of this because so many people talk about the gospel of the original, and it was nice to have the opportunity to try it without having to worry about things like flashback. I will say that this powder is basically almost the color of my skin, so this works very well to set my entire face. It works well on the under eyes as well if I'm not going for anything, you know, too dramatic, and it also works really nice to set sort of where I have like my smile lines as well. It does a really great job of helping there. So overall, nothing but good things to say about this powder. Next up, I have the Dermablend setting powder here in Warm Saffron. This is definitely a much brighter powder than the Laura Mercier, and it works beautifully under the eyes. This is what I love to use to set my under eyes when I want a more highlighted look. Again, this powder I don't think is as finely milled as the Laura Mercier, and this definitely adds a lot more color, whereas the Laura Mercier, with it being already so close to my skin tone and it being a very sort of, you know, a powder that's not meant to add color, it doesn't really add color. This one does add a little bit of color, and it's like this perfect golden tone brown. It just looks amazing underneath the eyes, and I would highly recommend it if you have a deeper complexion. So next up, I thought I would talk about brows, and I've been using the same sort of holy grail brow product for years, and that is the Anastasia brow definer. I use the shade dark brown. This is their thicker brow pencil. It's got a triangular shape to it as opposed to the Brow Wiz, which is a lot thinner and skinnier, but I love this for my brows. I won't say that I have thick brows in that like they're like full of hair and luscious, but they just cover like a wide area of my face, so it's nice to have something that has this shape to it to really help fill in those areas very quickly. Like I love the Brow Wiz, and I love the L'Oreal dupe for it is really good as well, but I find that those thinner pencils they tend to be very tedious when you have, you know, sort of more area to cover. So this is really easy to just go on with when I just, you know, am being lazy, because honestly doing my brows is one of my least favorite parts of my makeup routine, just because brows are kind of boring in my opinion. So it's nice to have something to kind of help go through the process really quickly. A lot of times I will use this in conjunction with a thinner brow pencil like the Brow Wiz, because I feel like those two together work as a perfect power couple. For the longest time though, I was looking for a dupe for this, like a more affordable dupe. L'Oreal actually did come out with a dupe version for this product last year, and I tried it and I was super disappointed. But I know Maybelline came out with a product somewhat similar to this as well this year that I've been trying, so we'll see how that goes. But my major con with this is it pains me to have to repurchase this, because I go through these pretty quickly and these are not cheap. Next, I thought I'd talk about blush. I'm not like the hugest blush person, even though my collection might tell you otherwise. But there are a couple that I found myself gravitating towards last year. The first one being Lorac Cinematic. This is one of their Color Source buildable blushes, and this does not look like much in the pan, I will admit. I didn't even think it looked like much in the pan, but on the skin this looks beautiful. It's the most gorgeous, very neutral, sort of nude, you know, blush, I guess you could say, but for a darker skin tone, because so many sort of like neutral blushes, they tend to be very white based and they either don't show up on dark skin or they look ashy on dark skin. This does not do that at all. So this is a blush that I love. It's one that I can throw on whenever I am not sure of what blush color I want to wear, or I'm not sure what will go with whatever I'm wearing, because this just goes with everything. The next blush product I wanted to talk about is actually a palette, and that is the NARS Narcissus Unfiltered 1 palette. This was a limited edition palette that came out, I want to say like a couple years ago, but it was still like floating around, hanging around, coming in and out of stock and all of that jazz. So I did buy this in 2017, and I absolutely love it. These blushes here are gorgeous. These three products up here are more so like subtle highlighters, but I will say I love these as well. I know NARS came out with their, was it the Bonk Disable highlighting powder last year, and I actually had that and I returned it because I did not like it whatsoever. It was just very chunky and not easy to work with. These tones in here are very similar to that palette, but like a lot better, so I really enjoy these. And then these blushes are really nice too. You've got, again, more of a neutral one. This one has a little bit of a pink tone to it though. Then you have this shade here, which is a deeper sort of berry color, and then you have Exhibit A, their red blush, and you just can't go wrong with a red blush. Like, red and orangey tones are like my favorite types of blush tones, so really happy to have that here. And yeah, just overall really good product. As for bronzing contour, I pretty much reached for the same trio last year, and that is this one right here. This is actually a Makeup Forever like trio palette, but the powders that you're seeing, these are actually Anastasia Beverly Hills contour powders. These two right here I actually did not buy last year. I bought them I think the year before during their Black Friday sale for 2016, and then this one I did buy this year to kind of complete the palette because I didn't, you know, before it was just these two in here. And this is the shade Copper Brown, which I use as a bronzer, and then these two shades I use as contour. This is Espresso and this is Carob. Espresso is a beautiful everyday contour on me. It's so easy and effortless, because contour is one of those things that was very intimidating to me at first, because I would see people, especially on YouTube, do contour and they would always start off with like this like really distinct like stripe on their face, and I was like, oh my gosh, that looks like it would take 5 million years to blend. So I like the fact that this is very like effortless, because it's darker than my skin tone. It's noticeably darker, but it's not that dark. Carob is that more extreme contour on me, but still super easy to work with. The Anastasia contour powders are great. I don't know if you should call them contour powders, because there are just so many tones in there. There are powders in the past that I used. This highlighting powder is from her that I really liked as well, from this contour powder line, but overall this is a good quality these are good quality powders. This one here, Copper Brown, like I said, I added this one this year and I use this as my bronzer, and I love this. So many bronzers that I do have in my collection, which is not that many because there really aren't that many bronzers out there for us with deeper skin tones. But this one that I use as a bronzer is really nice, because a lot of the ones that I do have are very, very red, whereas this one it's still warm, but it's definitely a lot less red, almost more orange leaning. So I like to use this whenever I don't want something that's like super red. So yeah, this trio, I reached for this a lot because it was just so easy to have this in front of me and just have, you know, again, my contour, my bronzer, and not have to worry about reaching for other products. But I am going to try to branch out this year, because literally I probably reached for this on an everyday basis, no joke. So I wanted to talk about highlighters, and this was really a hard category for me because there were so many that I wanted to talk about that I really did thoroughly enjoy, but I also don't want this video to be, you know, an hour long. So I really just tried to narrow it down to the ones that I loved. I probably still will do like a favorite highlighters and highlighter collection video at some point, but for now these are the ones that I will mention. The first highlight that I'll talk about is the MAC Extra Dimension Skin Finish in the shade Superb. I can't open it to show it to you in this shot because it's completely cracked. Ulta sent it to me that way, and they sent me another one, but I was like, well, I mean, it's not like this one is like completely non-functional. I can still use it, so I've been using it. And this is a really pretty taupe highlight. I really like the MAC Extra Dimension Skin Finish formula, and I thought a good way to do this video would be to talk about like one of my favorite colors from my favorite formulas that I tried this past year. So this was one of my favorites. Technically MAC had put out this type of formula before, but they made the formula permanent last year, and this color is a really gorgeous taupe color. I would say if you have a deeper complexion and you're looking for a highlighter to look almost like you know, just that wet look on the skin, where it's not a super gold color, it's not super bronze, it's just like a more neutral highlight that just gives your skin a highlighted look, then you should look for a taupe highlight, and this is one of my favorites. The MAC Extra Dimension Skin Finish formula is a really great formula. They are really metallic. They're not over glittery, they don't look chunky or powdery on the skin, so I would definitely check them out if you are interested in those types of highlighters. So the next highlighting powder I want to talk about is from Bobbi Brown, and this is the shade Tawny Glow, and this isn't that dissimilar from Superb in that it is sort of like a taupey highlight, but this one just has a more of a pink tone to it. Bobbi Brown also makes one of my favorite highlighting formulas, which is very sad because they're super expensive, but again, a really great formula that is more metallic, has glitter in it, but it's not over the top chunky glitter. So this was one of the colors that I reached for all the time last year, because again, it was really easy to just pair this with lots of other looks. So this is Tawny Glow here beneath MAC Superb, and you can kind of see the subtle differences between the two. Like I said, Tawny Glow is a little bit more pink, but they definitely both run in the same taupe family. And the last highlight I want to talk about is the Becca Lightchaser here in the shade Opal Flashes Jade. I thought I'd talk about one fun highlighter that I really enjoyed, even though there are other ones I could talk about, and there are other Becca highlighters I could talk about as well, because I really enjoy the Becca formula as well. But again, I wanted to really just narrow things down here, so I decided to talk about this one, and this one really stood out to me because it just took me by surprise. I was not expecting to like this one as much as I did. It just seems like the most impractical highlight. It's like this bluish greenish type of color, but I don't know, during the summer when I was doing lots of more colorful looks, this just was the perfect highlighter to use. And the formula again is great, not chunky, glittery, it just goes onto the skin really smoothly. And the last highlighter that I want to talk about, I would be remiss not to mention it because it made me do something unprecedented, which was to buy a backup of it, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about highlighting powders, because who finishes highlighting powders? But I did it anyways, and that is the MAC face powder in the shade Here Comes Joy. Now this was a limited edition powder that MAC did from their holiday snowball collection last year, and I just fell in love with this color. So this is a face powder from them, not to be confused with their Extra Dimension Skin Finish. This actually is a lot more subtle than their Extra Dimension Skin Finishes, which is also why I kind of tried to justify it in my head, because I do find myself, you know, swirling my brush around a lot more in this product to kind of get the coloring that I want, or sort of the intenseness that I want. But that's the great thing about this powder, is that you can have it be very subtle on the face if you want, but you can still build it up to be pretty intense. So this is the color right here, and the reason why I bought a backup of it as well is because I just felt like I didn't have a color like this at all, nor had I seen one like this. It's this really pretty sort of like gold with a, I won't call it a rose gold, because, you know, there are definitely lots of sort of rose gold highlighters you can buy, but almost has this like deep coral tone to it, like a rose gold, but for like really well suited for deeper skin tones. And you can definitely see the sort of duo tones in here as well. Sometimes it does look more gold, sometimes it does look more, you know, rosy corally. So yeah, I bought a backup of it because I loved it that much, but honestly I could probably see myself hitting pan on this highlighter eventually. So next up, I wanted to talk about all things eyeshadow, and you can't talk about eyeshadow without talking about eyeshadow primer, because in my personal opinion, you need a good eyeshadow primer to do some good eyeshadow. So the two that I'll talk about here first are two MAC paint pots, and I've been using MAC paint pots for years, particularly this one right here, which is called Groundwork. It's a really pretty like taupe color, and then this one is actually newer to my collection. I did buy this last year, and this is the shade Camel Coat, and I actually got this on Haute Look. Haute Look had MAC Cosmetics on their website a few times last year, and they were selling these paint pots. So if you're ever in the market for some discounted paint pots, check out you know, Haute Look's events and see when they're selling MAC. But I love MAC paint pots because they give the lid a little bit of color to them, a little bit of a lighter color, and I like these two colors in particular because, I don't know, Painterly and Soft Ochre always looked a little bit too scary for me, like a little bit too stark for my skin tone. And the two shades that I have are, I don't know, they're just a little bit more, they're not as scary looking on my skin tone by themselves. Sometimes I feel like using something like a MAC Painterly or Soft Ochre, I'm like, am I even going to be able to cover that up with eyeshadow? So these colors are really a lot more toned down while still being a nice light base for your color shadows to adhere to. And that's another thing I love about these paint pots, is they do give the lid a little bit of color for your eyeshadow to kind of cling to, especially if you have a deeper skin tone and you find you have trouble building color up with certain eyeshadows. Use a really good sort of colored base, because that will definitely help. And paint pots are really useful because, in my opinion, they work as primers and bases in one. I find that using MAC paint pots, I don't have to use a primer underneath them because they do help my eyeshadow stay on a lot longer. I don't experience any creasing or any oiliness breaking through on my lids when I use paint pots. So those are the two that I've been using, and I would really highly recommend them. Next up, I have the NARS Smudge Proof Eyeshadow Base. Again, another NARS product that is a cult favorite, has been for quite some time, but it is newer to me. I picked it up last year, again, when Ulta started carrying NARS products, and I have to say I really love this product. I was definitely a little bit skeptical because it's a $26 eyeshadow primer, but it works very well. I also love the fact that this goes on completely clear. That's another issue I've had as somebody with a deeper skin tone, is finding an eyeshadow primer that doesn't leave a basically like a white cast on the skin, because quite a few of them do. That's the reason why I can't use original Urban Decay Primer Potion or Too Faced Shadow Insurance, because they both do that. And even though they work, you know, well as primers, you know, it doesn't matter if I have, you know, irregularities with my eyeshadow because of those products. So this goes on completely clear. It dries down, or it sort of sets into place, but it does maintain a little bit of tackiness while feeling also sort of like velvety at the same time. It's really a really interesting like feeling, I guess you could say, but you could see why that this would be great for eyeshadow, because it does sort of set into place and it makes sure that your eyeshadow will stay in place, but it also gives the eyeshadow something to adhere to. It's also really convenient that this has a wand. Now to talk about actual eyeshadow, and this was also difficult because I feel like with eyeshadow and a lot of color cosmetics, I tend to really bounce around and I don't stay consistent, but there are a few that I did want to mention as ones that really just stood out to me last year. So first up, I wanted to talk about the Stila Perfect Me Perfect Hue palettes. These did not come out last year. In fact, I didn't even buy these last year. I've had them for quite some time, but I picked them up quite a few times last year, particularly when I was traveling to my parents' home, because these were, you know, really small, easy, convenient to grab, and the formula of these is really great. I never hear people really talking about Stila's eyeshadow formula, aside from, you know, like the Glitter and Glow, which is, you know, not your traditional eyeshadow, but like their traditional powder eyeshadow formula. I never really hear people talk about them anymore, and they're really good in my opinion. I think they're better than Too Faced, and you know, people talk about Too Faced eyeshadows a lot. Like Stila's eyeshadows definitely are better in my book. And the concept here I thought was really cool as well. So Stila always launches their palettes in collections anyways. Typically that's kind of like their thing, but for this collection they decided to come out with eyeshadow palettes geared towards different skin tones. So they had a fair light, light medium, medium tan, and tan deep, and I actually have both the medium tan, which is this one here, and the tan deep because I thought these would both work well for my skin tone. And I just really enjoy them, and I really love the concept as well, and I'm really sad that these did not get as much hype as they should have, because they're great. The concept is great. I would love to see other companies take on similar concepts instead of, you know, trying to come out with products that are, you know, quote unquote universal, which is totally unrealistic. So I love the fact that they did this, and these are so great and just not talked about. So if you ever see these or can catch these on sale, I would highly recommend them. So the next set of palettes I wanted to talk about are the Smashbox Covershot palettes, and these didn't come out last year either. They did come out at the end of 2016, so I feel like that should count for something, but either way I reached for these quite a bit last year, and I really like the concept here too. These sort of like, you know, very compact palettes that have a lot of, I think, useful colors in them. I will say that I think they came out with like 8 or 9 of them, and I feel like the other ones that I didn't pick up out of these were all very neutral, which is fine, but I feel like none of them would have worked very well on deeper skin tones because they were very like white based neutrals, unfortunately. So I could have did better on that front, but I do really enjoy these 3. So the first one I have is the Ablaze one, which I think was their best-selling, most popular one, and you can probably tell why. It's got those, you know, great warm tones that everybody goes crazy over. I would say if you were feeling overwhelmed with the amount of warm tone palettes that were on the market, and you didn't want to have to buy the, you know, Modern Renaissance and the Naked Heat and, you know, the Tartelette Toasted palette or whatever, this is your one-stop shop right here. This combines the best of everything in all of the trendy warm tone palettes that we've been seeing on the market. So, you know, you've got, first of all, you've got your, you know, off-white base shade, which I know is very important for people who have, you know, lighter complexions. You've got a gold, you've got a rose gold, a burgundy sort of color, a bronze, more orangey gold, and red tone orangey brown, and like a really dark brown for like smoking out looks. So just everything that you could possibly want from those warm tone palettes, like the best of those palettes sort of put into one compact palette. And that's why I really love this palette. Like there's nothing in here that is wasting space, if that makes any sense. So definitely would recommend this if you want sort of like warm tone palettes redux. Next up I have the Smoky palette, and I was not expecting to like this one as much as I did, but I really enjoy this. Smoky palettes I tend to like shy away from because I always feel like they're gonna be like something that's gonna look really terrible and ashy on me. This one did not whatsoever. I love this palette. I love that they threw in these sort of like pops of colors with these sort of burgundy and the green, the sort of like jewel tone colors, because they work really well with the other colors. This taupe up here is really nice. So overall, this gray is really nice. Overall, just a really nice smoky palette, and not sort of the typical smoky palette that you would expect. And then lastly, I have the Bold palette. This one I think unfortunately has been discontinued, which is so sad because this I think is their best one, or their most unique one out of the bunch. And it's like, I kind of understand why people continue to make neutral palettes, because I feel like I guess those are the ones that sell. And unfortunately I guess nobody really buys palettes like these, but I love these types of palettes. And I know I said that I thought I wasn't gonna like the smoky one. This one I was also not sure about, because even though I love the color selection in here, I was very skeptical about Smashbox doing colorful mattes. And these down here are all matte shades, by the way. These two are like transformer shades, which I don't really care too much about, but these shades right here are all mattes. And I was like, Smashbox doing colorful mattes, like that's not their wheelhouse, that's not what they're known for. So I was very, very skeptical, and these are actually really, really good. Like, they're probably some of the best colorful matte shades I have in my collection, and these are great if you're doing more colorful looks and you want some like transition colors. These are great. So I'm really sad that they discontinued this palette, and I would say if you can somehow get your hands on this or find it somewhere, snag it up. Next up, I wanted to talk about these two lovely quints. These are the Dose of Colors Baked Browns and Marvelous Mauves. I love these two palettes. These are some of the best mattes I have ever worked with. They're very, very soft to the touch, but more importantly, they blend like a dream on the eyes, and they're very, very pigmented. And I think that these are great too, because they can sort of stand on their own if you want to do like an all matte sort of gradient look, but they also work really well as companion palettes. You've obviously got, you know, a bunch of nice warm browns here that would work well with other colors. For me personally, especially with a darker skin tone, and sometimes, you know, missing these sort of like transition type browns, this is really nice to have on hand. And then Marvelous Mauves, I reached for this a lot last year because I did a lot of purple eyeshadow looks, so this one got a lot of love and a lot of use. And I did actually recently pick up the Sassy Siennas and Blushing Berries, but because I bought those in, you know, like a few weeks ago, I'm obviously not going to mention them here, but I do really enjoy these, and I enjoy the format of these as well. I think Dose of Colors did a good job of giving you, you know, 5 colors that are all distinct but still follow a gradient, which I feel like a lot of companies have done miserably. A lot of companies come out with palettes that have duplicate shades even when they're trying to stick within a theme. So I really appreciate the variation in the shades that you do get, even though you're only getting 5 in each palette. So next up, I wanted to talk about the Huda Beauty Obsessions palettes. Now these did come out sort of more towards the end of last year, I think in September, towards the end of September, and I actually didn't pick these up until November during the VIB sale, but I still had to mention these because these basically took up the last couple months of the year. I was almost exclusively using these eyeshadow palettes. The formula on these is amazing, and I do have the 2 other Huda Beauty palettes, the Desert Dusk and the Rose Gold, and the formula on all of these blows the formula of those out of the water. These are amazing, and they are completely different formula, like literally it's a different ingredient list and everything. So if you didn't like the formula on either of those two, I would say don't let it prejudice your thoughts of these, because this is a different formula. And the color stories here are really great too. The mattes blend really nicely. The shimmers are really nice as well. I feel like you can get a very sort of like Instagram glam look from these palettes, maybe with the exception of like the Electric Obsessions palette. And I think that that fits the brand's sort of overall image as well. So overall, I really like these, and they're very easy to work with. $27 a piece, really compact. I've noticed that I think all the palettes I've shown you are really compact. It's not that I have a bias for smaller palettes. I really don't. It's just that the ones that I happened to reach for this year tended to be smaller. But yeah, love the Huda Beauty Obsessions palettes. I probably will still do a video on those, even though I know that they've been out for a while, just because I just love them. Lastly, I wanted to talk about lipstick, and again, lipstick is difficult too because I feel like I kind of bounce around there as well. But as far as releases last year and what really stood out to me, I have to give it to the L'Oreal Pro Matte Infallible lipsticks. These are actually very similar to the Maybelline Super Stay matte inks, so if you like those, I think you would like these as well. I think for me, the reason why these got the edge though is because the color selection for these was better. And I know that Maybelline has actually now extended their line of those liquid lipsticks, and there are some deeper tone neutrals, some more interesting colors. But again, they came out with those this year, and plus I haven't gotten around to trying any of the new colors, but I think the color selection here was great, and the formula on these is amazing as well. I just picked out 2 of my favorite colors. This one here is called Shakedown, and it's a really pretty, gorgeous nude color, like warm tone nude color. If you have a deeper complexion, I would highly suggest it. And then this shade here called Rose Blood, which is a really deep blackened red, done very well, which is amazing for the drugstore because I feel like some higher end companies can't even get this type of color right. This is not patchy whatsoever, so definitely love these 2. I recently tried mixing them together, which I hadn't tried before, and it created a really nice like mauve color, so that was also really cool. But yeah, overall really nice long wearing lipsticks. I did do a full video on these with a review wear test, so if you want to know more about them you can check that video out. But this is definitely the lipstick launch that stood out to me for last year. So that basically wraps up this video featuring my current staples. Definitely feel free to let me know what your current staples are as well, and if you feel like 2018 is going to change that for you. I definitely feel like I'm gonna have a lot more eyeshadow singles to talk about by the end of the year, but it'll be interesting to see how this changes. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.